All right. Welcome to the City of Bloomfield Hills City Commission meeting for April 9th, 2024. Let's all begin by reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, so let's begin with the consent agenda. Do we have any questions, comments?
Sandra, can I ask you, what are the flying locksmiths? You have the, I don't know if I can bring that up here, but just $8,000 for flying.
They did some work on two doors.
The two new doors.
The two exiting doors. One in the fire bay area, three in the kitchen area. So they replaced the door. Frame as well.
Oh, so that's the cost for the two doors and the locks and all that. Okay, just seemed like a big number. Okay, thank you.
If there are no other comments.
Oh, but I have one other question.
Okay.
The sanitary sewer work on the last page, 6 of 6, has that gone in motion? Is that $6,000, almost $6,000? Is that just for the plans or the assessment of the situation?
To both Rock and Clark, that charge.
Yeah.
For the Chesterfield pipe redesign.
Yeah, I thought nothing was happening with that, but
Well, they had to do some work to design it.
okay.
That expensive for it.
Great, thanks.
Just had a quick question for Chief Gormley. Any updates on the home invasions? Anything new happening, or pretty much as reported here in your report?
Mostly as I reported in my report, there hasn't been a lot of activity in Oakland County since Easter weekend.
Okay.
Weekend and the 2 weeks prior to that, we had some activity here. In our own city, we had activity Easter weekend, Good Friday, I think was the 29th.
Okay.
But since then, we haven't had any activity, though.
Yeah, there's always tomorrow, right? Yeah.
Yes, that.
Right, okay, thank you. And Brian, how are things in the building department?
Busy.
Yeah, sounds like it.
Very busy.
All right, do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Move to approve the consent agenda for tonight.
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Okay. Moving on, recognition of citizens in the audience. This is for individual comments, and it's limited to 3 minutes per person. This is going to be for anything that is not already on the agenda, so if anybody wants to speak, now is your chance. Yes, could you please identify yourself? And
Hi, I'm Barbara Hackle. I live off of Kensington Road, and with the construction taking place on the 15th along Square Lake, are we taking any precautions? There's going to be a lot of extra traffic on Updike and Kensington Road with the way they have people exiting. Will there be, people never drive the speed limit on Kensington to begin with. Is there going to be any extra patrols or anything?
We can monitor Kensington and Updike Road, and there will be traffic alterations, like always in construction zones, and usually within a day or two we can quickly identify where those problems are, and we will concentrate on problems.
Okay, great, thank you.
all right, any other comments? No? Okay. Moving on, the commission will consider the ordinance policy.
Thank you, Mayor. Because of our our last goal, we completed all our goals this year except our last goal, which is to review the city's zoning ordinances and consider amendments to support the administration of the city code and bring clarity and understanding. So we've noticed that through all our, work with applicants, that there's sometimes, confusion in ordinances, and we wanna try to make it better. So to begin to do that, we wanna make sure it's an inclusive, and collaborative process. And, we believe and most communities believe that it's, a best practice to include everybody, anybody that's involved in this, to have some sort of input. And so, once that occurs for a zoning ordinance, then that would go to the planning commission, and if there's further, the planning chair can determine if he wants to have a subcommittee on that or not. But even if he doesn't want to have a subcommittee on that, I believe there still should be the input from everybody. And so that's really what the major change in this ordinance is. The ordinance, with this policy is, so the policy we had before was really just designed to make sure all the commission had input and understood what sort of ordinance changes from a city code perspective. And that seems to be working pretty well. But I believe this addition to this policy is critical for us, and I believe, I've talked to all the staff, including our consultants, and they appreciate the effort because they believe that they could have some valuable input, and they have.
And it's with respect to the zoning ordinances only. It applies the
Yes.
new language.
Yes.
Yes.
I mean, if there is, instances where, our attorney would have some valuable input in code, city code, obviously we would, have that involvement, have that input. And
Well, this policy affects city codes as well, right?
Yes, it does.
Yes,
But
but specifically adding the language for making sure that the planners and the planning commission have input. My question is that just for zoning ordinances, or is that for anything under the city?
Well, so it wouldn't typically have anything to do with the city code. The planners or those consultants wouldn't be involved, but certainly they would be. I'd like to have everybody that's has some input on, or has involvement in all zoning codes to have some input.
Mhm.
Because we believe that one of the things that we're doing actually is we're having a MuniCode who puts our city code together and puts it on in our website.
Mhm.
We're actually having them review any conflicts or any discrepancies, because we think that's the first step. Actually, I think that's the first step. The second step is to have a policy that gets everybody involved, but it doesn't take away from what we've always done. Is that the planning commission is the authority that approves zoning codes, and the city commission, or that recommends zoning ordinance changes, modifications. And the city commission is the approving body, but the city code and zoning codes. So essentially, that's the primary driver in this change of ordinance. I think it's important.
Can I ask, does this relate to, like, one of our goals was to simplify the building formula for building a house? It just seems
Yes.
really overcomplicated. The architects that we've worked with 20 years and recently are just amazed at how convoluted the formula is, and the extra time it takes for any architect to comply is really extraordinary, and it drives up the cost for the constituents. And does that go in line with our
That's
goal
exactly
to
it.
simplify?
That's exactly it.
Not simplify, keep it with the same goal in mind, but make it.
So an example is I've asked the planners to provide me with a list of conflicts that they've went into, and we're reviewing those. But also our planners have had to talk to our city attorney on multiple occasions, so we document it and we try to ascertain why they're having difficulty in understanding, and I can have, and Dirk, I'm sure, can speak to this, but conversations with Dirk is some of these things are not just us looking at the code and having some difficulty with it. There are a lot of different ways to see or to interpret the language. So this is kind of a huge project for us, but This is kind of a beginning step, but we absolutely would want to make, our objective as the administration is to try to make this process as easy as possible, but still comply with the city code and, keep the character of the city. But we feel like that there's conflicts and there's discrepancies and there's language that's potentially conflicting, and we just want to take a deep dive into this. But I just want, personally, I just want everybody involved, is really what I want.
Well, and this is really just the starting point of that.
Yes.
Right, so this is describing the policy change that involves all parties,
Yeah.
and then,
What I want to avoid is somebody on some place, either a consultant or some board member, whatever, they see one issue and they work to get that issue done without the input of everybody else, because there's a lot of unintended consequences that can happen. And so I just think it's I know it's a best practice, and that's all this is about. It's just about being inclusive and making sure it's done right.
But it won't slow down the process for the residents or slow down you're
So we want to have a book, our idea of it, to be honest with you, I would like to go through the dozen ordinances that are constantly a problem, maybe come up with some good graphics, make some of these changes, make sure there's no conflicts within the current structure of the code we have. But, to be honest, if that's all very successful, I like to see if there's a way that we can maybe not recreate the wheel, but find other communities that have a real user-friendly, quick access book, which would take some work on our part and some cost. But I want to have a success under my belt before I come to the commission and ask for some of those things, and that would be maybe next year's goal if this all works out. But I'm confident it will. I'm confident that some of these changes that we'll make will be better for the community.
great.
Alice, I see a lot of highlighting over there, so.
Well, are there any other comments? Are we ready for a motion? Okay, I move that we approve and adopt the revisions recommended to the administrative policy number 24, entitled Ordinance Revision Process, as presented to us in the agenda packet for tonight's meeting.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Okay, commission will discuss automatic pool cover ordinance amendments.
Oh, did we forget the student and audience?
No, we
didn't.
Okay. Sorry.
All right, so how are we kicking this one off?
I'm gonna pull this up. So, we did have a resident who's here today, who's approached us a couple times to ask the commission to consider that we potentially follow the International Pool Spawn Code and allow for a pool cover to be a primary barrier as a safety barrier for pools. So I reviewed Mr. Stephen Craig, who's here tonight with his wife. I reviewed Mr. Craig's material that he gave me, and then I was directed by the commission after the second time Mr. Craig came here to look into the safety of pool covers and pool fences, and I did some analysis and provided a report to the commission. I was also asked to look at some of the area communities and what they do, and I provided that in this report. And really, I think it's at the point where there should be some more discussion with the commission and ultimately a decision.
Tonight, though, since we don't have a full commission tonight.
You don't have to, but you can at least maybe discuss it.
Well, I gave it a lot of thought, and I talked to a lot of people since the last meeting, just randomly, people that I know, who some have pools and some don't, and not one single person thought it was a good idea. And to me, if you have a pool, there's two benefits to having the two major benefits. One is to swim in it, obviously, And if you're swimming in it, the pool is uncovered. And the other benefit is they enhance the beauty of your yard. I mean, you spend a lot of money to make it look beautiful, and they don't look so beautiful when the cover is on. So I thought that, you know, the fact that we're relying heavily on people having a pool cover on is putting a lot of faith into something that, you know, to me the inclination would be not to have the pool cover on, because you're going to be swimming in it or you're going to be looking at it. And even if you're diligent, you're going to leave the pool sometimes while you're swimming in it and go into the house, and the pool will be open to the public. And I mean, not to the public, but I mean, it's open to having someone fall into it and drown. And health and safety to me is a primary concern when you're talking about an ordinance. This law that we're requiring a fence with a specific height and specific bar, you know, the
Spacing.
spacing,
Yeah.
yes, to make sure that a child can't get in, is something that people thought about a long time ago when they were on the commission, and they put a lot of effort into drafting the law that we have on the books, and it's certainly intended to protect people. So if we were to make this change, it seems to me we're making it less protective for everyone. And even irrespective of a liability issue, if a child was to drown in a pool because of a law that I changed, I don't think I would live with myself, honestly. I'm health and safety is number one to me, and I take these laws that we have on our books very seriously, and I don't think we should just change them without an excellent reason, and I haven't seen an excellent reason here. I did a lot of research to find out why the state of Michigan adopted this, and I don't see how they got beyond these questions. I don't see how I mean, that's just my opinion, but for what it's worth, that's how I feel.
Well, I feel like our community is rolling hills, and one of the beauties of our town is that we do not have fences with every single house and every lot line delineated by fences. I'm number one with safety. I have 4 children, and I think if the pool cover is safe, the pool cover is considered safe, and Birmingham is allowing it, Franklin's allowing it, and there's also the additional alarm you can put on the pool that sends off this incredible sound, because I have a lot of friends in Florida as well that have pools in their whole fenced area, you know, within their fenced area, and the kids can come and go from the house, and some people have alarms on their doors, but a lot of them have these alarms actually in the pool in addition to the pool cover. So there are things to do, and I think sadly some of the accidents happen with people right there. You know, you've heard of it happening to famous people, and it's awful. I mean, I've been putting swimmies on one child, and the other one just walks right in, and there's a whole group of people in the pool, and they don't even see. So I don't think I wasn't able to determine if drownings that are reported are because there's a pool cover and no fence. That was really hard to find. So
But the
I
thing
struggle
is,
with,
excuse me.
yeah, so that's just my other
The thing
thought.
is, we're changing the law, and it'll apply now and in the future, and it will apply universally to everyone in the city. And, you know, certainly there are diligent people that I could say, yes, I know they'll be diligent, but then you don't know what's going to happen. Somebody could sell their home with their pool to someone else. They could have a house sitter there who's using the pool. They may not know how to use the pool cover. They may not be so diligent. I even read something in some pool cover material that said one of the benefits of a pool cover is it keeps the water warm. But then they said sometimes in the summer, the water gets too warm under the pool cover, and they recommend that you uncover your pool for 3 days then before you use it. So that's 3 days that a pool would be uncovered with no barrier around it. I mean, there's just so many examples I can think of that could turn out in a bad way. So I just, I won't support it.
Actually, I'm also an advocate for it because I look at our season being so short, and I know that, I don't know a great deal about the pool covers in that certainly the technology wasn't available years back, and now it's available as an alternative that wasn't considered back when fences were the practical solution. So for the fact that there are alarms and there are other things that can safeguard it, I don't know why we wouldn't. And if we compare ourselves to other communities where the density is much greater than ours, ultimately it's the homeowner's liability concern. I don't think it's really on the commission to manage whether it's one or the other. I think they have to have one or the other. So I think ultimately it should be their decision.
And Dirk, you mentioned, could the city be liable if there was?
No.
No, if you adopted an ordinance requiring just pool covers, or you could adopt an ordinance, like Mr. Fisher said, allowing pool covers or fence, either or, no, the city would have no liability if something happened either way, so.
A pool cover is a great thing in addition to a fence, but a fence is always there. There's no maintenance issue really. A fence is gonna be there. There's no issue of the gate can automatically close and lock. There's no issue of human error, mechanical failure. What if you have an old cover? Your cover may wear out and maybe you don't have it updated. Maybe, it leaks. Maybe it's got holes in it. Who knows what's going to happen? Things change over time. We're changing a law that's a very permanent thing, and this is something that has to be, you have to be on it all the time. Are our people going to be policing these pool covers?
Well, it could be in the ordinance that you have to pay for a pool inspection every year before you open
But
your pool.
to me, we're talking about potential human life and potential serious injury, and to me, that's more important than some sort of just,
Well, I tend to echo some of Commissioner Buckley's comments because we actually have a cover just like you're describing, and our experience with it is that, to your point of having to leave it open for several days, we found that we've had to do that because otherwise the chemicals get too strong and you have to open up to air it out essentially. And then the other aspect of it, which I don't know if you've got one yet or not, but when it rains, when there's leaves, all the debris that gets onto the cover, you can't just roll it up. You have to clean that cover off before you roll it up and use it. So it's sort of a deterrent to actually using the pool, because every time you want to go use the pool, you got to clean the cover off to actually retract the cover. If you don't do that, then you pile up all that junk in the cavity where it rolls up, and eventually it'll get bound up because of that. The other thing that we found is that they do break, and ours broke such that it wouldn't close, and so then it just had to stay open until I could fix it. And on the other hand, I don't like fences. I don't like perimeter fences and even pole fences. If we didn't have to have them, it would be great. I don't really like the aesthetic of the fence, but did have a personal experience actually several years ago when we first moved into the neighborhood. We had some friends over, a young child. They had their firstborn with them. He was, 2 or 3, old enough to walk around. He walked away, and we couldn't find him. We ended up calling the police department. The police came, and they was really smart. I don't know why we didn't think of this, but they went to the neighbors that had lawnmowers running and said, turn those off. Turn everything off, because they wanted to hear if they could hear the child screaming or whatever. And finally we heard the child, and he was at the neighbor's kitty corner holding on to the pool gate trying to get in. So and the pool was right there. And I'm not trying to sensationalize this, but I'm just saying I had a personal experience with it where a fence prevented the child from getting into the pool. And I just know from personal experience that it's a bit of a maintenance challenge to keep those covers functional, to keep them clean. And what ultimately happens, and this is what we do, is we leave it open almost all the time, because otherwise you can't get into the pool efficiently, you have to clean the cover, and maybe we have too many trees near the pool, so maybe that's our fault, but, so I see a lot of the benefits and, negatives around it, but I would tend to fall on the side of, Commissioner Buckley, so I think we have a split commission
Let
on
me
this
just pose
issue.
one more question. So the neighboring communities that have them, they've had them, I'm assuming, for a while. Is there any relevant information that would make them undo that decision?
Probably not. I would hope that there wouldn't be much information of people drowning,
There's only
in the
two.
city.
Because I guess that's my point. If it's a bad decision, they would undo it.
And there's also the safeguard of the alarm. If you have to keep your pool open, you put this alarm in there,
Yeah,
and
but a child could drown while the alarm is.
the alarm
going.
is shrieking, you can hear
But
it
still,
from.
a child could drown in a few seconds, you know.
Well,
Not
you
everybody
know,
will get an alarm, you know.
Fences aren't foolproof either, I mean, the gates can be
No.
left open, but,
No, but in our ordinance, it requires a self-locking gate that self-closing, self-latching mechanism. So that's what you have to have. And it's very specific, you know, somebody took a lot of time to think this through, and, you know, I don't take that lightly. I don't think I should just change it just because I think it's a good idea. I think, you know, this has been on the books for quite a while, and it's a very important law. Should we move to discuss this when we have a full commission?
Can do that?
yeah, I think we're gonna have a split commission on this if we do it today.
Tonight?
If I may make a comment,
Please, yeah.
is that okay? May I approach?
Yes, please.
Thank you. So, I guess I heard a lot of conversation, and I'm so appreciative of the research that was done and all the thought that you all put into my request, our request. I think safety is the most important concern, and the part that we may be missing is that the statistics show that 80% of drownings occur from invitees, right?
I don't care about statistics. I mean, I make my own decision based on a possibility, not statistics. So, you know, if even one child drowns,
Of course, but what I'm saying is that 80% are invitees. So when I say that, what I mean is to have an ordinance that permits as an alternative an automatic pool cover will actually be statistically more likely to save that one child. And the reason is the majority of drownings occur from coming out from the house. So there are people that are in your home. It's your children, it's your friends. Those are the people that have greatest access to the pool, and that's what the auto cover saves, which is one of the main reasons why not only the state of Michigan, but the Pool Code Association, as well as the pool builders, decided to move forward with this. And it's the reason why it's well supported and adopted. So not having an exterior fence allows people to afford the additional expense, which is considerable, of having these automatic covers. So if you can address the greatest risk by having this, you can certainly say, well, we can have this in, the pool cover will prevent the greatest potential harm.
a pool cover that's properly maintained, that's being used by someone who's diligent, that, you know, knows that there's an obligation. That's a lot of ifs to get to that point.
Of
Whereas
course.
a fence is a barrier that's up. You know, a fence is gonna be there for a long time, and it requires no thought.
But it does, because the fence doesn't go between the house and the pool.
Well, I think our law requires it, doesn't it?
No.
No, it does not.
We have,
We require three
Three-sided.
four sides, but one side can be the home, is the fourth
oh, all
barrier.
right, well, maybe we need to tighten up that, then.
I don't think you can.
I mean, furthermore, to talk about the fence itself, when you look around the city, a lot of the pools are older, and the home that we're in, there was a pool. When we arrived, the fence was broken, the gate was broken, it was rusted, and it was basically open, and actually wild animals would come in and out, deer too. So unless the city plans to inspect every single fence, many of which have been grandfathered in because they were built before this ordinance in terms of the specificity around locks, many of those risks remain. we were at a friend's home fairly recently. They have a pool fence, and when we got to their home, the fence was propped open. And the reason it's propped open is it's inconvenient to have that as you're going in and out. So all of the same reasons that we talk about for being concerns are things that happen with a pool fence.
I don't think they're as likely to happen because of the permanence of a fence and because of the requirements that we have, that they be self-locking and self-closing. I mean,
So and I know you don't like statistics, but
I think they're both. I think a pool cover is a very good thing to have in addition to a fence. And I think, it's a great idea, especially if you do have children in your home. But
so what we're regulating or legislating to protect is against a scenario where someone who doesn't belong on the property enters the property without any notice and enters it at a time in which this pool cover is open and or broken. And then they fall into a pool at the negligence of the homeowner. And so
I'm not talking about liability. I'm not talking about legal liability. That's a whole nother issue. I mean, to me, if you're saying, I don't care if someone drowns in my pool because I'm not going to be liable, that's not the way I think as a city commissioner. I can't sit here and say, I don't care because the homeowner won't be liable, the city won't be liable. No, someone's drowned or someone's seriously injured, and there's a potential there for that happening. And our law is already written to help prevent that.
So I don't want to be argumentative here, but the law was written in a time where there weren't alternatives, and the suggestion isn't to absolve yourself of any liability, but rather what is a true risk or not. Every single thing that goes on in life, there's a risk associated with it.
I think about these things all the time. My son goes to sleepaway camp. I write letters to each and every counselor. I make sure that the camp directors understand that my child sleepwalks. And I worry about him leaving in the middle of the night and them not knowing something like that and him going into the lake. He's in a front cabin by the lake. I would not ever have a pool without a pool cover. It's that much safer in my opinion. It's safer because every time I have kids over almost every day in the week, on the weekends, in the summer, and these kids are over and they're swimming and we're watching, and then when we go inside to eat or when we go upstairs or whatever it is, pool cover's closed. We go back down, the pool cover opens. I live around a lot of trees. We have a pool brush. We have a hose that sprays the water off every morning automatically. It just sprays the water off. It's really great. It's a little thing this big. Put it on the cover. Open the cover.
So just in closing, because I can see that.
I'm not trying to upset you. I agree that I care about safety of children, elderly, and every single person that comes to my home. And I think the pool cover, I know, is the safest option in my opinion.
You're certainly entitled to your opinion.
Can I ask, and we're kind of going over time on this, but, I guess we don't have a limit, but what is it, I mean, you can certainly have the cover and the fence,
Yeah.
Is it the fence that is the objectional, is that what is
Yes.
driving
Yes,
this?
I don't see the need for a fence at our home
Mhm.
by any means. I see that we are plenty safe with our pool cover and don't see the need for a fence. And like I said in previous meetings, we have a very large yard. It would cut off the yard. It would stop we have wildlife and it's beautiful. We love it. We love the deer that come up and it's amazing. We don't want to have a barrier that is unnecessary.
Right.
Just in closing, the other aspect that's not being addressed is the economics. Today, pool fencing, aluminum fencing, or things that would meet the city requirements are extraordinarily expensive, and it's a massive cost. In addition to it, over 50% of your planning commission meetings relate to pool fences. So to remove something that is an administrative hurdle for most homeowners is something we were just talking about, to reduce the cost, the complexity around remodeling the home, which we just spent a lot of time investing in and going through. Hi, Brian. I think is significant. And so again, this is always a balancing effect of these scenarios which are very limited in potential or risk, and significant upside benefit, which is administrative, it's financial, and it's also beauty, which is important to us as members of the community.
Yeah, thank you. I would just say, I agree with you when you talk about the ecosystem within the fence. Definitely, that makes a lot of sense to me. And I agree that it's the majority of these tragedies occur with friends that come over and aren't familiar with, the risks of kids jumping into pools without permission or whatever. And so that is where the real risk lies. It's just, for me, it's difficult because I experienced just the fence saving a kid, and so I'm a little bit on the fence about this. And we've got
That person had a pool cover and he couldn't have gotten in the pool anyway.
If it was
wouldn't have been an
well,
issue.
it's on the pool,
right. If it was,
there's a lot
if it
of
was
ifs.
closed and maintained, yes, that's true. And I know from personal experience, it's difficult to keep it closed all the time when you're not using it for a lot of the reasons that we've talked about. So I'm on the fence about this, and I think tonight we don't have a full 5 members. I don't know that I'm prepared to.
No, I don't think we can, but can I ask what the statistics you were gonna say that you
Sure.
stopped saying?
So it's effectively 80% of drownings occur with what I'll call invitees. That's my word, not what the study shows. But basically, when you look at, there's an organization on drowning prevention. I think it's called the Drowning Prevention Alliance. They talk about a list of all the things that are most important, and they talk about the statistics. Sure, anyone would say you should have belt and suspenders. It's like having a seat belt and a roll cage in a car. Like, it would be great in an ideal world, but in a functional world, a seat belt is sufficient enough. That being said, it's the most common occurrence is these type of drownings with people that are in your home. The second most common occurrence, and even perhaps more so than people that are drowning by falling into the pool, is actually we'll call it the induction system. So the water jets and how the water cycles. And that's something, if we actually were to take a look at our code, we could look at making some changes to it, because there's different types of piping that has been changed and modified by this updated building code that if we referenced eventually, then pool builders would be forced to be used. Now, we use one of the 2 companies in town that will actually use the proper standards, but because we have these old laws that have been on the books forever, the builders were able to kind of build towards the older standards that we haven't yet adopted. So a reference here to the standard that's used by the state, along with most of the other states, would allow us to then have safer pools in general, not just in terms of the covers and fencing.
Do we have a motion to table this?
I'll move to table it until we have a full commission.
I'll second that.
All in favor? Aye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
All right, we'll move on to considering the special events ordinance amendment.
Mayor, the city commission requested a review of the tent usage in the city and possibly update special events ordinance for the purpose of monitoring and permitting tent usage. And we came up with an iteration, I believe, last commission meeting, which I believe the commission saw as problematic with potentially requiring or not allowing certain properties to have a number of events. And so there's been some modification to that ordinance. The newest iteration of the ordinance is in your packet, and essentially what it does is it allows tent usage, a 20 by 20 tent to allow for a duration of 5 consecutive days, and but there's the ability applicants to have a tent up for a period up to 30 days if the city manager determines that the use of the tent will not negatively impact the surrounding neighborhood. There's also ability for an applicant to approach the city commission to request a tent to be used for an event longer than 30 days. And they would have to discuss with the commission what the potential impact of the reason for the use and what the potential impact would be. And so the administration is just trying to find a solution for the commission, and I guess it's open for discussion for you.
Any comments?
I think it's a reasonable first draft. I mean, that's,
I think it's a reasonable addition.
I felt so too. There was one thing maybe I'm just not reading it correctly, but on the last page, section H calls out the activity, event, or use does not exceed 10 days in duration in any calendar year. Is that supposed to be 10 or 5?
That doesn't, I think that's something different. I think we did.
Is that
something that we caught before, Amy, and something different?
Letter H on the second to last page.
Second to last page,
I remember
yeah.
us discussing this. I think it's something that's not applicable, or it doesn't.
Yeah,
Maybe Dirk can.
there was language deleted that needs to go into. That, initially when I drafted the ordinance, I had that language in there. That language was in the existing ordinance, but I added language that's saying, except as otherwise provided in the new section, which back then was 3 times a year, 5 consecutive days for each of the times. So that overruled it. That 10 days really applies to the parade portion of it, which is 17.5-2. So what the language you would have to add is the activity, event, or use does not exceed 10 days in any calendar year, except as provided in section.
Well, I guess where I was going with this, I was just trying to, if it's 5 days for a tent and 10 days for the event, how does that work? Do they have to submit for 2 consecutive 5-day?
No.
This is actually a separate portion of the ordinance.
Okay.
This ordinance is a long ordinance. It has a couple of different aspects to it. That's just something that's separate.
Okay.
It's not applicable to what we're trying to.
Right.
But are we approving that change too? So we need to know.
No, that needs to be modified, because that's currently the issuance section, and the way the permit section has been broken, it's broken into 2 sections basically. Tent usage is one section, and parades and other activities are another section. So that it needs to basically say the activity, event, or use does not exceed 10 days in any calendar year, which applies to the parades, except as provided in section 17.5-2-B, which is the thing that addresses tents.
Right.
So that, you just need to add that additional language at the end of that.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I thought this was pretty reasonable as well. Do we have any comments from the audience?
May I approach?
Yes, you may. Thank you.
Nice to see you all today. Thank you so much for being here. Before I start, I'm going to introduce my colleagues who are with me today. Albert Bell is our senior warden at Christ Church Cranbrook. He is the highest ranking layperson. And Scott Erskine is the chancellor of Christ Church Cranbrook, the co-chancellor. And what that means is that's a fancy word for the fact that we have a lawyer that we don't pay. Scott Erskine is versed in law. I think he was Michigan's top lawyer in 2015. A good litigator. My name is Bill Danaher, and I am the rector of Christ Church Cranbrook. I've been in that position for the last 10 years. Since before 2007, we've had a tent that we've had up every summer. I did some research for you all because I think there was some concern about that. This is from Google Earth, 2007, June. This is from from Google Earth 2018 in July. You'll see that there's been a tent there for 17 years. It's something where we go to gather for worship, which is something that was instituted as a law in a beautiful piece of legislation that was co-sponsored by Orrin Hatch and Senator Edward Kennedy. It was done in 2000. It has very clear criteria for what constitutes unreasonable obstacles to religious communities meeting and their zone areas. One is that there has to be protection against substantial burdens on religious exercise, which means unless there's a compelling government interest, you really can't tell me what to do if I'm on my property. And we have protection against unequal treatment for religious assemblies and institutions. So something that you've been doing and allowing for 17 years would be arguably a fair treatment. What you're asking us to do, if we have to follow this law, it's unfair. We have protection against religious or denominational discrimination, which maybe doesn't apply. Protection against total exclusion of religious assemblies, that doesn't apply. But also protection against unreasonable limitation of religious assemblies. So, the tent that we have is something that was wind tested to over 120 miles per hour and won awards. It was something that we used to come back and to gather as a community. It's something that we use on a weekly basis. We have 50,000 people that come to Christ Church Cranbrook every year. They come because they want to go to an AA meeting. They come because they want to go to Al-Anon. They come because they want to worship. They come because they're part of the Boy Scouts. We have welcomed everybody. And the fact that I get calls the week before Christmas telling me that the town commission is against the tent is frustrating. And I get a call the week before Easter that the town commission is considering a different use of that tent is frustrating. We want to work with you. We have never hesitated to fulfill every permit. I've been before this commission before in different iterations to talk about a major build that we did. We fulfilled every concern that the town had. We've done our best. And I am a little emotional about this because that tent that we have, we purchased it because we had to get the church up and running again after COVID. We purchased it in 2020 and we put it up. And we were struggling. People weren't able to come to worship. And I called my mother and I asked her if she would buy me a tent. And she brought me the best one she could get. And she died today. So, I'm happy to answer any questions, but I've been not party to many conversations about this, and I will defend this right completely. We will work with you, but I will defend this right.
Well, thank you for your...
Mr. Mayor, if I could, I'd like to make some comments about the legal
Yes, please.
implications of all this. So, and I'm very sorry for your loss.
Thank you. Just part of the job.
RLUIPA is it's a federal law that was enacted to protect religious institutions from unreasonable land use regulations. That doesn't mean you can't apply any land use regulation to churches or any other religious institutions. That's not the case at all. In fact, RLUIPA basically has two essential causes of action. The first cause of action is a substantial burden on the religious exercise. That's the first one. And the second one is what I'll just call the discrimination and or exclusion approach. So let's take the second one first because that's easier. The discrimination and exclusion approach means somehow you're treating a religious institution differently than all other similarly situated uses. Here, this ordinance is drafted, doesn't do that. This ordinance applies across the board. So the second cause of action under RLUIPA, I think, fails automatically because this ordinance is uniform and applies to everybody, residences included. So that takes us to the substantial burden portion, and the Reverend is right, the Father is right, that if it's shown there as a substantial burden on the religious exercise, then we've got to show compelling interest. The $1 million question is the substantial burden portion of it, though. And there's a number of cases, worldwide outreach versus Chicago is one, that takes a very, very stringent and restrictive view of what substantial burden is. In that case, they basically said substantial burden must mean the end of a given ministry or the religious activity is basically prohibited. In the instant case, I would argue very vehemently that this ordinance does not impose a substantial burden because it in no way, shape, or form prevents the religious activities from going on the Christ Cranbrook property because they can obviously do them indoors. In fact, not only that, it would allow them to do it on occasion outdoors, under the 5-day, 30-day, or longer than 30-day, depending on the various approvals. So, if we were passing a law that prevented the church from having services, you bet, that's a substantial burden. We would have no compelling interest to defend against that. But that's not the case here. The case here is we're just saying you can't have it outside all the time. And I think there's a certain component backing out the legal aspect of it. You've got to, RLUIPA's fine, but you can't use RLUIPA to justify every single thing a religious institution does. And I think if you look at the myriad of cases, I can go through about 20 of them right now, it's clear that there's plenty of regulation you can do apply against a religious institution. At the end of the day, though, I would argue that what is being proposed here doesn't impose a substantial burden because all it does is require that the services be primarily held indoors and allows for some outdoor services, but just not outdoor services for potentially 5, 6, 8 months. There are other people that surround that church that are impacted by those services. So
there's only one neighbor who actually borders where our tent is, and that's Cranbrook Educational Community. I don't have any burdens on their tent use. I'm not worried about them meeting outside. The problem that you're stating that you're imposing on us is it cost me 3 men to be able to put up that tent. 8 hours, 3 men. That works out to about $1,000 when you bring in all the other ancillaries. So you're going to tell me that I have to put the tent up and take it back down every 30 days when it's being used constantly by the community. People go and sit under there because they find we've always opened up our campus to everybody. The problem I have, and I will test your precedent on that, and we'll see how far it goes. But the problem I have is that this is being considered under special events. The tent use that we've had for the last 17 years has never been determined by special events. I'm happy to do a permitting that is going to be applicable, but it seems like there's been some confusion by my facilities manager. We've always just tried to comply with what the city wanted, and I'm not sure if this even applies as a special event. I mean, we don't do special events. We use it as an outdoor space.
Father, very, very sorry for your loss. I did want to clarify a couple of things. I don't think, at least personally I know, I don't think the commission is necessarily against the tent. And this change that we're considering leaves an option for having a tent up for more than 30 days, correct?
Yes.
I don't think you should keep it. Yes, then I would have to come back to the commission and get permission to do it every time. We need to specify what the process would be.
I think the process would be an annual permit application, and then you would apply for having the tent up for more than 30 days, bookended by beginning and end date, and that would be approved, and you would be able to maintain the tent as you do today.
So that's the informal practice that we've been doing for the past 17 years. We've come up with a date when it would go up and when it would go down.
The problem happens, however, if there's a situation where we have to enforce another tent situation that, for whatever reason, needs to be enforced because of neighbor problems, whatever. We don't want to be in a situation where, well, you didn't enforce it here. Why are you not enforcing it or, you know, why are you enforcing on me when you didn't enforce it over here? That's the problem that we always get ourselves into. So we're trying to find a way that works for everybody and doesn't set ourselves up for unintended consequences with, you know, with this. So
Was there a compelling reason to re-examine this policy outside of the tent at Christ Church Cranbrook?
Yes, neighbors complained.
It doesn't matter. What do they?
Well,
I mean,
well,
what
we
is the
represent
nature
the
of complaint?
residents,
What is
and-
the nature of the complaint?
We represent the.
Yeah, but I mean, is it aesthetics? What is it?
Yes, it's a non-permanent structure, and it's not congruous with the building and the architecture. And complaints have been that the structure is a tripping zone, that some of the things have been outside of the
I guarantee you those
area.
very neighbors have been under that tent for services. And so, I mean, I'm just very curious about how they got it back and forth safely. We've never had an incident. You can check our incident reports. No one has ever tripped on it. We've been using it for 4 years. There's not been an issue with it.
I guess the tent was brought because of COVID, and COVID is over, and you have a gorgeous facility, indoor, outdoor. You did all those beautiful renovations, and I guess there doesn't seem to be a need, and we see that residents are complaining, and you have an incredible facility. We applaud you, and we've worked with you, and we
Yeah,
support you, but we need to represent all of the residents.
Sure.
And respect their opinions and respect their. They drive by it. Everybody.
I understand.
It may not be
that.
right next to it. It may not be blocking the view from their house. Maybe, I don't know. But
So there's no houses near it. There's no houses near it.
but you understand that we represent all
So
of
they're
Bloomfield
driving
Hills.
by.
We
They're
don't.
driving by bothers.
Well, people live nearby, and it's more than just one person. So we have to respect the residents, and we need to.
But I think that all the substantial, so what's been said, just so you're taking notes, has been an aesthetic issue.
Yes,
No,
but-
that was just what one
but hang
person
on a
said.
sec, but I'm sorry, but I'm sorry, Commissioner, I just wanna respond.
Please do.
You're trying to ask them questions to see what you think the compelling interest is, but the burden of us proving the compelling interest doesn't come into play until a substantial burden's been established, and there's no substantial burden been established. There's an inconvenience, and if you read the cases, especially the one out of Livingston County, inconvenience or an extra expense to a religious institution does not constitute a substantial burden. So we don't have to show a compelling compelling interest at this point because no substantial burden's been established.
I'm gonna just invite my.
And I'm sorry, Commissioner.
No, thank you for clarifying.
You know, I don't wanna get up here and give legal arguments, but what I'm hearing is that, first of all, it seems like Christ Church is being singled out. Because it's the residents are complaining about a specific tent, which is at Christ Church. Second of all, we can discuss this and maybe work together to come up with a solution. I think it's easy to do that. I've read multiple cases. I have a different opinion as to what many of them say. And the ones that seem to say what Mr. Beckerlich was saying, a lot of times involve changing zoning for apartments or things of that nature, and religious institutions saying, well, we need to change the zoning for these apartments, that's part of our worship. And that's where the courts have said, okay, well, you're going too far. That's not part of your worship. But again, we could debate this, or we could just work together to come up with a solution. And I think there are several solutions that we could come up with.
Mayor, so we have a meeting tomorrow with these gentlemen at 1 o'clock, Dirk and I. So I just recommend that we can talk to them. But do you see this ordinance as objectionable? I just have to ask you, because I see this is actually helping you.
I do, and one part that is objectionable is when, under the federal statute, when you have a group or an individual that gets to decide on a case-by-case basis, that's a problem under the statute. Because then that group or that person is free to say, I don't like Catholics, I don't like Episcopals, I don't like Christians, I don't like Muslims, I don't like Jewish people. And that's in part why the statute was enacted. So I do see it as a problem, because you have humans deciding, if you want a longer period of time, you go to a commission and they decide. And it's nothing against you folks, but who's gonna be the commission 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 15 years from now? No, none of us know. And that's part of the reason why it was enacted. But again, I know there's a solution if we work together. Yeah, at 1 o'clock is the meeting, right?
Yeah. And what's funny about it is the number of people who have complimented us on the design, which was award-winning, are numerous. And I don't know if maybe we should do a referendum for the town on whether it's pretty or not before we want to speak for anybody.
I'm just reiterating what was said in letters, so.
We're gonna have a nice meeting tomorrow, but just want to let you know where we think things stand.
Okay, appreciate it.
Thank you.
In light of the meeting tomorrow, I don't know that it makes sense to vote on this now, so, do I have a motion to table this?
Move that we table it.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay. Commission will now consider the mayor's appointment recommendation for an alternate to the zoning board of appeals. Before I get into this, I just wanted to give a little bit of history around the appointments to board and commissions. Going back to 2008, the city commission discussed creating a board and commission's appointment process for appointing residents to serve as members of the planning commission, ZBA, and board of review. Mayor Zambricki gathered the applications from current board and commission members and interested residents that have never served, and contacted each person to learn about their background and their interest in serving the city. Mayor Zambricki made recommendations for board and commission's appointments, and they were approved at that public meeting. So my understanding, after talking to Amy about this a little bit more in detail, is that there really wasn't a policy around this previous to 2008, and essentially board members could go on in perpetuity in that position without any review, and so this was a way to review the applications, and there were new applications coming in, and maybe the appointments would just, the mayor would decide that maybe we needed to mix things up a little bit, and those appointments would be made as such, so that you wouldn't have board members on those boards in perpetuity. So that was the purpose of that, and just giving a little history. And so that's how the mayor is involved in these appointments. And historically, the mayor has made the appointments. And in this particular case, we have an opening for a ZBA alternate, which is actually the second alternate. We already have an alternate, and this is for a second alternate position. And just for some context, in 7 years, we haven't had to use that second alternate position, so it's just to give you an idea of how often that comes into play. Regarding this second alternate position that we're filling tonight, or we're attempting to fill, that term expires January 26th of January of 2026, just to give you an idea of the term. So just going back to February, I believe it was, and maybe late January, we had an application come in for the ZBA alternate second position, and at the time we didn't have any other applications. And I reviewed the application, contacted the applicant, talked through what the interest was, and everything seemed fine. And we had no other interest at that point in time, so I mentioned to the applicant, Mr. Doug Burley, I just pointing you out, I'll get to you in a second. I mentioned to him that we would need to talk to the other commissioners, and so I talked to Mr. Burley, came back to the other commissioners, and so everybody was aware of the situation, and it was going to be on the agenda in March, but I was not at the March meeting, so that got pushed off until the April meeting, and in the meantime, there are other applications that have come in. So, in fairness to Mr. Burley, I am appointing him for this second alternate position, and we can vote on it tonight accordingly, and if there's a need to reconsider the other applicants, you can vote as such tonight, and we can resolve it that way. So,
Okay.
do we have any comments or questions for Mr. Burley? And then you would have the opportunity to come up if you'd like. Do you have any questions?
Sure, just
Okay.
love to hear this.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Commissioners. I'm Doug Burley. I live on Parkman Drive. My wife and I live on Parkman Drive here in town. We've been here for about 5 years. I'm currently the president of the Kern Lake Property Owners Association, which is our lake. We have 22 houses around it. My philosophy in a nutshell, I think we have a world-class city here in Bloomfield Hills, and I don't want to change it. So, I want to keep up the great work that the city's done, and I want to see this city excel as it has been. So.
Thank you.
I move that we approve Mayor Baxter's appointment of Douglas Burley for an alternate to the Zoning Board of Appeals.
Do you have a second?
I'll support.
Support.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
Thank you.
Welcome to the ZBA.
Welcome. Thank you for volunteering.
Okay. Commission will hear city manager comments.
I don't have any comments today. Mayor, we have a lot to talk about
Yes,
tonight,
we do.
so-
Okay. And now moving on, the commission will consider other business. Any other business? Nope. All right. Well, I guess at this point, the commission will move into closed session to discuss pending litigation and union negotiations. Do I have to,
You actually need a motion for that.
okay, do I have a motion to move into closed session?
I so move that we move into closed session.
Second?
Or I'll second his
I'll second.
motion.
Okay, okay. Going into closed session.
I recommend we